Alright guys, I wanted to hop on here and give a full rundown of the Rogue Invitational, which just happened, and I very luckily, I don't know if that's the right word, but I came out on top, and that makes the Arnold, Worlds, and Rogue all in the same year. One competition short of my ultimate goal, which was the Big Four, but I'm very, very happy. Now, there's been a lot of chat about the Rogue Invitational, so I thought I'd just go event by event, tell you about how the athletes were notified of everything, how everything went down, yeah, we'll draw in conclusions. But I think the most important thing is that Rogue is working very, very hard to bring strongman to a new audience, and I think something that we have to accept is that they've run the Rogue Invitational without strongman before, and it's gone very well. Very much could go back to that if people cause too much of a stir about them not doing things perfectly. I think on one hand you can complain if people aren't original enough, and on another hand you can complain if originality means that there's some mishaps, but you can't be angry about both. They're trying to do the right thing. Say something like the Rogue Coaster. There was a major improvement on that this year, which I'll talk about in a minute, but if there's someone to trust to get things right, it's a company who's done what Rogue has done, not just in strongman, but with their own equipment. We know that they make the best equipment. We know that it's the highest quality. What they've done with CrossFit and their involvement across multiple sports. If we're going to trust someone to get it right, we're going to trust Rogue. And I encourage them to keep trying new events. I encourage them to keep building new kit. And you know what? In the end, we have to accept that if they do that, that not everything is absolutely perfect. And sometimes that's okay. Now, let's go through event by event. Now, first up was Tower of Power. This is the clip from this year. I had a little clip from last year as well. This felt as though it was lower than last year. It wasn't, in looking at the video. But originally it was going to be 19.5 inches. There were some issues with getting the apparatus raised, so it was 18 inches. Inch and a half, it can make a big difference on the deadlift, but it's exactly what it was last year. We can see in the video where the weight comes on here. Sorry, there we are. You can take a rough look at where it is about my knee, and then if we look last year, it's somewhere in the same when the weight comes on. So really, no major problems. But I think experience on this definitely helped. All the guys who did it last year did very well this year. Now, the weight was also supposed to be heavier, and the lift was supposed to be higher. We ended up doing the same weight, the same lift, just no briefs allowed this year. So I was very happy. I ended up with 8 reps. That put me in third. Sorry, 7 reps, which put me in third. And honestly, 4 or 5 weeks out from the show, I didn't think I was going to do it. I bulged a disc when I was at an event in Orlando. Had a very difficult time walking for a week. So this was a really good start for me. Then the first change of the weekend was that the Iron Bull sled pull got moved from outdoors to a corridor. Now this, here we are. This little area was actually, might be a controversial take, but this little area was actually phenomenal in terms of energy and experience for athletes. I think it's fine for the stream. The only people who I think missed out were the people who were there live, because it's not a huge viewing area. As we can see here. So it's really just the length of that and a few rows of people deep. But in terms of viable solutions for a rainy day, there's absolutely nothing wrong with this. Now, this piece of kit itself, I think looks really, really cool. And this is probably the start of a little bit of controversy. We've got this wood sliding on the rails, but I think I have an explanation to why it was happening. And I think the people who are saying that it got harder as it went, I just don't see how that would have happened. Like, the physics of that changing that much over the course of half an hour, to me, just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, if we take a look, obviously Mateusz is one of the best truck pullers in the world. And bear with me here, but I think there's some important things to look at. Okay, when he starts his pull, and this is something I noticed as guys were going, as soon as the weight goes from the hips into the shoulders, in that I mean, when you see the tension go from this part of the belt up here, the sled almost always grinds to a halt. So let's just watch Mateusz, and we'll watch this pull. But when he digs his hips down, it moves really, really well. Okay, now, one thing to not forget, remember his arm over arm performance and how strong his top half is. So his hips are staying low, and really there's a lot of tension on this part of the belt. As it starts to slow, we can see that he's starting to get a little bit up and down with his shoulders, and now the weight's starting to go through the shoulders, not the hips. So once the weight goes through the shoulders, we see how much upward force there is on this apparatus, and that makes it really, really difficult physics-wise to put the same amount of force in. So starts to slow. Now we get into these hip drives, and these hip drives, the lower the hips are, the better off it is going. Now, could it have gotten marginally harder? Maybe, but we also see that he's working really, really hard to drive this weight through his hips. I think if we contrast that with maybe we'll go Tom Evans. So Tom's gone a little bit later, and
driving the hips a bit lower, bringing the chest a bit.
We can see from the get-go he gets a little bit through his hips, but a lot of this is starting through his shoulders. This initial pull position, okay, not too bad once he gets going here, but he's certainly not in that same position as Mateusz, where he's leading with the hips for most of it, okay? And then he just goes into this very vertical kind of hip thrust position. One thing that people haven't talked about enough is the choice of shoes. So we have the same surface as the Wheel of Pain. I don't know if we're going to be able to see my shoes, but I was testing shoes quite a bit on this. We'll probably be able to see them here. And I put a shoe down here. That was not calling my shot or anything. That was just because when you're pulling something behind you, you don't know where the finish line is. And so I put something down just so I know where my body would be when I hit the finish line. But this is really one of the keys here. I had the turf shoe by Tier, the CXT1 turf shoe, and you can see all these nubs in it. And those nubs, they catch on this. A lot of people were trying to wear like Nobles, for example, and a flat surface just wasn't sticking on that. And this is another thing. One of the challenges here is that you can't wear rock climbing shoes on this, or at least no one tried to. And so it's not the same as a truck pull where you can get that really strong first pull, get your body real horizontal, and stay very, very low with the shoulders, because the lower you go with your shoulders, the more you're going to get up onto your toes. And the more you get onto your toes, the less surface contact there is with the surface. And with this bull, you don't get the same amount of force. So, if we look at me and when I went, I do think it's relatively coincidental that guys going later performed worse. But the reason that I had this really unusual kind of vertical hip-led technique is because I saw the guys who led with their hips, that's when the sled was moving. So this is not how I do a truck pull, but it's also not the same as a truck pull. You'll see my torso stays quite vertical, and I try and keep the weight in my hips as much as possible. And I get a reasonable start that way. But like this, if this was a truck pull, that's a horrible position. But with this guy, it's attached very, very low. The length of this rope isn't the same as it would normally be. The rope is in the rope attached behind you. It's not the same as it would normally be on a truck pull, so it's even more important to be low. So you're actually going to get penalized for being taller in this event because you're pulling this at a higher vector. And if you do that, then you're not going to be moving it as well. So you can see this angle, if we compare that to some of the guys who didn't do as well, which you can go off and do on your own, it is much lower. Yeah, in a perfect world, that's pulling dead straight. That's obviously impossible. But that's why this sort of weird technique was relatively effective arm over arm wise for quite a while. And then it just turned into grit and constant hip drives and hip drives and hip drives and a lot of pain. I think they'll make corrections to this event if need be, but I think me going third last and coming second in the event should say that there's no way it got substantially harder. There's other guys who pull trucks really, really well, but this isn't a truck. And I think if you look at the angle at which people were pulling, weight going through the shoulders, was not working at all on this implement. So a little bit unique, a little bit of adaptation required in the moments, definitely an advantage going later, but something that I think you could have seen on the day and you could have adapted to if you were one of those people lucky enough to go a little bit later. So I hope this stays in, and I hope they make a couple of corrections. The dead stop apparatus is a really interesting idea. It just needs to be perfect. The one thing is I did my level thing, same thing I did at Worlds, and this was slightly uphill the whole time. I bet if they just turned the bull around and started it from the right side of the screen here and we went to the left side of the screen, I bet we wouldn't be having the same conversations. It would have been slightly easier. We would have had multiple guys finishing. But here we are. In the end, Mateusz is the best truck puller out of the 10 of us, for sure. I won the truck pull at Worlds. We were 1-2. Evan's quite good. Tom's very good. And we were the top at the truck pull. So I don't think the results are outrageous, per se. Now, in this event, obviously, Trey hurt himself. And all positive thoughts out to Trey. It's a risk that we all take in this sport. But it's still really, really unfortunate when something that traumatic happens. I don't think anyone's fully prepared to take that on. So definitely best wishes off to Trey. Now, after this event, the third one was supposed to be the Fingals Finger into log press. I was really, really excited to do that. And that event just wasn't possible. It was raining all through the afternoon. I was hoping they were going to cancel it for that day because I would have been going 10th. Rogue, as we know, is unique in the sense that you go based on your overall placing the whole time, not your placing in the previous event. Sort of pulling the order from CrossFit style of things. And if you had 10 guys walking across wet ground, even if they kept the log dry, the area for the Fingals Finger dry, the area for the log dry, you would have 10 guys with wet shoes going. And so that could get really slippery and really dangerous. The other thing I think we have to appreciate is that it's not a good look for strongman if someone sees it for the first time and sees traumatic injury. Right or wrong, I think Trey got this traumatic injury on the bull pull, and Rogue went to a response to say, let's not get anyone else hurt with factors that we can control. And I think that was the origin of the Fingals Finger bit being taken out. I think that's conclusively agreed upon. And the log for reps, I think that is a safer movement than the axle clean for reps. We all know you could rupture a bicep doing the axle clean for reps. Should they have kept it in? Shouldn't they have kept it in? I don't know. But I think that's the rationale. And I think, really, if people are just trying to do the right thing, I don't see a massive problem with that, per se. So that took us to the end of day one. We go into day two with the Rogue coaster. One thing that Rogue did really, really well is making sure that everything was 100% fair. So none of us were allowed to touch this rope before we went up and competed. Same thing with the iron bull. Alexi happened to go up and just clip into the iron bull, give it a little bit of a pull, and then once they became aware of that, they said everyone gets a chance now to pull the bull. There's no unfair advantage to anyone the whole time, and that and safety was very clearly their top priorities for the whole time. Now, the Rogue coaster, this was definitely an improvement from last year, and there was no problems with it last year, but an improvement in the sense that this rope didn't stretch at all. What you put into the rope is what you got into the sled. Phenomenally done by Rogue. I was very, very impressed by this. Results-wise, here's where that shook out with Mateusz absolutely killing it. Tom, phenomenal at this event. Evan, very, very good at this event. And I finished in fourth, my worst result of the competition. Something where I need to look at how I can make that faster because it didn't feel overly heavy to me, but something I need to practice and get more efficient with because in time that's not going to be good enough. And I'll keep working away. But I think pretty much everyone from last year improved their results. I think the exception being Alexi. Otherwise, I think the results were improved largely because of the improved rope. And hopefully next year we can have another crack, same rope with heavier weight. This was supposed to be heavier, but again, after day one and after how much the Iron Bull took out of a lot of guys, it was going to be 2 70-pound bags and a 30-pound bag. They changed it to just 2 70-pound bags. And I think that was precaution, and I don't think there's a reasonable argument to say it would have changed any results. I think I might have been slightly closer to Evan. Otherwise, the guys in the bottom half, they were finding it difficult towards the end. That wouldn't have improved with a heavier sled. The guys up at the top, Mateusz and Tom, Evan as well, they were really having no problem with the weight. I don't think it would have changed the outcome all that much. So Rogue Coaster was basically as is. At this stage, this is where we thought we would have been doing Fingals into log. We learned we weren't doing that one, so we figured we were probably doing axle. We were told at the start of the day that axle swapped out log for reps. So log for reps, it stuck at 162 kilos at 365 pounds. And the decision, it makes sense for sure. This is the weight that we all train for. We all train to do a triple, so not necessarily for reps, but we train to do a triple under fatigue. So we were all trained to do log for reps in a way. Would the results have changed if we did log for reps prepared for it? Probably not. To be honest, you look at these results and contrast these results to any Giants Live log for reps, the log for reps at World's Strongest Man 2022 in the group stage, and this result is absolutely phenomenal. I think there was only 1 or 2 guys who got 10 reps of the 150 kilo log at World's Strongest Man last year, and Tom did that with 162 kilos on this log this year. Absolutely phenomenal result. There's no reason to say that additional prep would have changed the results here. One thing with the judging, I posted up on my Instagram story, there was some lockout, I don't know if issue per se, but there was some controversy with the judging and giving quick down calls. The one thing that I think we need to appreciate is that once we start getting into high rep efforts, the judge can do you a major disservice if they're asking you to hold under control for longer than required. Not really from a fatigue perspective, because if you have a log locked out and stable, it's fine. But more from the sense of you need time. You need time to get all of the reps in. So I think the refs did a good job, and I think it was consistent. I encourage anyone to go back and watch the whole event and see all 10 guys look at the speed that they were given down calls. The one thing I will draw attention to, though, with the technique that I use is the standing erect rule is interesting because, first of all, it doesn't really exist. We don't really have a rule book. It's not written in any rules, but it is written in most rules that you have to look at the ref, and most times that then takes care of the whole bit of standing upright. But every single rule book says that you have to have your elbows locked out. So, if we look at my technique, I just want to, this could help some people with their technique as well. We'll go to a harder rep
Tom is
for me.
exceptionally good at this last event that we have coming. He's going to have to really hit this perfectly if he wants to get it.
Okay. So, if we look there, my torso could rise, for sure. But I'm looking at the ref, and my elbows are locked out. If we contrast that to some other guys who don't lean back, like Tom probably has the best lockouts. So I think if we contrast that to Tom, when he's in a similar position, in terms of the log could probably go up another 2 inches if I were to stand up more, for sure. Now, context-wise, I get the down call virtually right where I pause that. Now, you wouldn't get the down call if... We're going to get Tom's up here.
And maybe put some more pressure on
if you are
top spot. Evan Singleton and Hooper have yet
more
to go, but
vertical, more
this
erect,
is even impressive and looks fast and slow.
Right about there is where Tom's at the same place, but both of his elbows are bent, and so there's no way that that could ever get a down call. But if your torso is leaned back and the log's in the same position vertically, but your elbows are locked out and you're looking at the ref, you do get the down call. And so that's really the crux of it. I don't really see this getting changed because there's no way to justify, like, you're not allowed to lean back into a log. And at a certain stage, if you're looking at the ref and your elbows are extended, it's really difficult for them to be able to do anything about that. That's really the rule. There's also the bit where I do it, Bobby Thompson does it, Iron Bibby does it. all of us would say once your elbows are locked out, the standing up bit is really no problem. Once you've locked it out, you can stand up. And so for me, press it, leaned back, continue coming up until that down call comes. So I might work on this in terms of improving my consistency and my stability, but down calls always come. So there's really no problem with that. That being said, this is really picture perfect lockout. So something to aim for, I suppose. People don't like my hips being back. Maybe that's part of it, but anyway. That was event number 4. Now, results-wise, this was a huge result for me. We go into this final event with a gap of 3 points between me and Tom. This graphic was just wrong. This is one thing that I did as well with my 9th rep, which if you were watching the stream,
if he only got 8,
I told Kiki that I was going to do this, and then I went up to the judges straight after, pulled up the rules, confirmed the rule with them, so that there was no question what I was doing when I was doing it, because it takes whatever you could get in a minute and a half, and it just adds 1. So this was a rule change, or not a rule change, but an event change. So we got sent the full rule list late the night before. So I read over that and then just used it to my advantage. So the time is technically out by the time I start this last rep or finish this last rep. But all I was told, or we were all told, is that the log had to be off by the time the time ran out. So any competitors out there, make note of this rule. If this is the case, you should bide your time, and if you're going to go for one last rep, you might as well wait to the last second and then just
this will be the final rep for Mitch Hooper. We'll count if he gets it.
So, like I said, 9 points, and that was good enough to give me a gap of 3 on Tom before the last event. So I wanted to pull up this last event because it was a source of more kind of confusion to some, but we were told really, really clearly they were having Wi-Fi issues. The beep wasn't going to be completely aligned with Go, and we were supposed to go on Go. Reason being, if you look back at Thomas Evans' log press, it happened in CrossFit as well, where they were having some issues with the beep. And the guy simply goes 3, 2, 1, go, and there was really no you're allowed to go on go or O or the end, but I sort of take that as soon as he starts saying go, you're good to go. So I just wanted to replay the starts from both of the heats. Now I would love to have the audio running as well, but I can't figure out how to do that. And let's just make sure we can see everyone. All right, so you can see in the first heat that some guys got a better jump than others, for sure, and that's just really competitive advantage type stuff. And the faster you're off the line, the better off you're going to be. So the guy's starting the countdown now. They're yelling at Tom to get his hand back on the thingo, and we can see that some guys wait for the end of go, some guys go at the beginning of go, and just sort of is what it is. It's a pretty normal start for a strongman event, really. Before we do that, I think there is definitely a reason to use a whistle or to use a buzzer like they did, because it just takes out any anticipation of what's about to come. But we can see here, we're obviously at 25% speed at the moment, so we can see a little bit more clearly. Luke's off, Alexi's off, Tom stays there for a little bit. And that was the start to number 1. Most of those guys got off pretty well. Then in heat number 2, we had a similar thing. So they're counting down now, and we can see Mateusz and I really quick off of the gun, and really looking it back. If you say that you're supposed to go on the start of go, him and I probably milliseconds early, if anything, but that's just the anticipation. I think Mateusz and I both really good at loading, and that's part of it. Like, part of it is the 100-meter dash, part of it is how fast can you get off the line. So definitely some controversy here, but let's watch it and then we'll talk about how that was corrected and what happened exactly here. Camera flips in a second. I've watched this back a bunch of times. So we're about to go. If we look at all 5 guys, you can see Mateusz and I both start off, and now the rest of the guys go. So it's about, I don't know, maybe one step. And I think this was the discrepancy between the G and the O, like the start and the end of go. We can see in terms of getting to the first bag, it's really quite close. Maybe that's overstating it a bit. But fairly close. Evan and Tom a little bit slower off the line. So that was that event. I'll let that roll through. And then after the event was over, there was a false start inquest put in, but with sort of the confusion around when we were supposed to start in terms of like start of go, end of go, and the buzzer being sort of obsolete. They basically just took every single person and took the time from when they started moving to the time when they finished and put their hands in the air, which is a fair way to do it under the circumstances, but it certainly operates under the assumption that everyone gets off the line at the exact same speed, which is just not the case. Some people are faster off the line. For myself, for Mateusz, we rely hugely on our athleticism to be able to get those quick starts. So anyway, that's what they did, and that's how it all shook out. But I think the real moral of the story is that Rogue is doing their damnedest to help the sport, to grow the sport, working really hard. The only reason that I feel the need to come on and talk about all of this is because the whole time Rogue really did nothing wrong. And I wanted to go event by event and talk about exactly what they did, how they treated us, how they notified us, all of the implements, and they really did their best to test the Iron Bull. They did their best to modify the events based on the conditions. My heart goes out to them for working so hard, for being able to put this event on and then having it all sort of turned on its head. But in the end, we still got it done. The result, 1-2, was the same as World's Strongest Man. Mateusz, if he was at World's Strongest Man in the condition that he was in at Rogue, there's possibility he could have snuck onto the podium as well. So we're really getting a repeated result. It's not as though the outcomes were hugely flipped on their head or anything like that. So anyway, that is the Rogue Invitational. Please recognize that Rogue could easily not have strongman and still run the Invitational. And if they continue to get the blowback that they do, maybe that's what they do. Maybe that's easier. So let's give them a lot of love because they are helping us massively. If you want the sport to grow, you want more people to get involved, Rogue is going to be our friends, and we'll turn up to the competition in droves next year. We will turn up ready, and they'll make the corrections. There's no chance that I or any other athlete or any fan would come to them with things that they don't already know, things that they aren't already working on and thinking about to improve everything for next year. So that is the Rogue Invitational. I am the champion and very happy to have had a very successful year. Time for a bit of an off season. I have things I need to work on. I'm going to work on that log press, lockout, make it more stable, and increase my shoulder strength, my tricep strength, and really just take a bit of a mental reset after what are we, 13, 14 competitions in a couple of years. It's been a busy time. So a little bit of time off now. And yeah, as per usual, lift heavy, be kind, and we will catch you next time.